Hey you guys, I just wanted to go ahead and say thank you, first of all, for your support and tuning in and all your comments and helping me out with my speeches. Since daylight savings time is coming up on Sunday, I thought I'd do an informative speech over daylight savings time and where it came from, what the purpose was, and what would happen if we stopped doing it. So, the other day I read a headline that said that daylight savings time may end in 2019. And it made me wonder, does it matter? I mean, why do we have daylight savings time? What's the purpose behind it? What's the history behind it? And this is what I found out. I found this anonymous quote about DST that made me laugh, so I kind of wanted to share it with you as a beginning. Daylight savings time. Only the government would believe that you could cut a foot off the top of a blanket, sew it to the bottom, and have a larger blanket. And it was an anonymous quote. There was no person who said it or didn't say it. But today we're going to discuss, first, what daylight savings time is and what purpose it serves. Secondly, we'll talk about the history behind DST. And finally, we'll discuss what happens if we stop using DST. So, let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. Let's begin by answering the question, what is DST exactly, and what purpose does it serve, and how does it work? So, what is daylight savings time? Daylight savings time is defined as a seasonal time change measure where clocks are set ahead of standard time during the part of the year, usually 1 hour. Daylight savings time is a tradition that was credited to Benjamin Franklin, who suggested people get out of bed earlier by candlelight to conserve energy. More about the history I'll do in a bit, but it didn't come into effect until 1916, when Germany established it as a way to conserve fuel during World War II. It's a little known fact, though, that the residents of Port Arthur, Ontario, in Canada, beat the Germans by about 8 years. The Germans basically just popularized it. The U.S. didn't adopt the tradition until 1918. Okay, so what purpose does daylight savings time serve? DST is used to save energy and make better use of daylight. The myth about it being created for farmers is just that, it's a myth. Today, about 40% of countries worldwide use it to make better use of daylight and to conserve energy. Hold on a second. Also, it has been said that the extra hour of daylight helps to reduce the amount of accidents that happen on the road. So if you're going to school in the morning and it's dark, it's being said that putting your clock forward an hour will help to reduce the amount of accidents that happen on the road, like going to school, going to work in the morning. I also pulled up a little visual aid that shows you the time zones. So we've got, PST here, Mountain Range times, Central Time, Eastern Time, and then you've got the Western and the Eastern hemispheres of the U.S. So I thought that would be a good example to show you exactly how it's broken down in the U.S. So now that we've discussed what it is and how it works, let's go over the history of it. The plan for daylight savings time was not formally adopted in the U.S. until 1918 on March 8th. Today's March 8th, isn't it? It established standard time zones and set DST for summer to begin March 31st, 1918 for 7 months for 2 years. In 1919, DST was repealed with an option for it to become a local choice. This was done because DST was an unpopular thing. Only a few states and some cities chose to actually continue with it. From February 1942 to September 1945, President Roosevelt decided to institute a year-round DST because of World War II. They called it wartime. It's kind of punny. Sorry. There was no federal law, though, so states and local groups had a choice on whether or not they wanted to use DST. A lot of people did, a lot of people didn't. there was a ton of issues back and forth because of local laws and customs. So the Uniform Time Act was signed into public law by President Lyndon Johnson in April of 1966. This act created a uniform system for each time zone. Um, the law was revised in 1972 and then amended in 1986 for DST to begin at 2 a.m. as not to interrupt daily life. The Energy Policy Act extended DST in the U.S. and began in 2007. Congress can still change it though if energy savings are not significant or if it becomes significantly unpopular with the people. So most countries in Western Europe start DST at 1 a.m. instead of at 2 a.m. like in the U.S. And although there are a few exceptions in the U.S. that do not observe DST, a lot of places do. Arizona is one place that does not, except for the tribal lands, like the Navajo. Hawaii and some other overseas territories like Puerto Rico don't observe DST either, and neither do the Virgin Islands. So now that we've learned a brief history about daylight savings time, let's figure out what would happen if we stopped using DST. So I pulled up a little map that shows, countries that observe daylight savings time. The countries that do not are in blue, and you can see them right here. This is Saskatchewan in Canada. You've got Arizona right there, Hawaii. The pink are the countries that do, and there's only a little bit of pink. A lot of Europe and Asia and parts of South America don't observe daylight savings time. It's mostly just a U.S. thing. So no one really knows what would happen if we did stop using daylight savings time. Some people think we should use it and some people don't. Some people are for it, some people are against it. Some states are trying to abolish it altogether, like Texas. Other states, like California, want to keep using the system. There are several pros and cons to keeping it and, getting rid of it. Some people say that nothing will really change if we do just totally get rid of DST. Others say it saves energy and gives us more time for summer activities, which I kind of agree with, but it is a pain in the butt to set your clocks forward if they're not, automatic. We've become very privileged. Other articles that I've read, people wonder why we don't go back to normal time in winter instead of instituting a year-round DST and squeezing out as much sunlight during the year as possible, which I agree with. So let's review a bit, shall we? Today we've looked at first what the purpose of daylight savings time is, what it is, and why we do it. Second, we talked a bit about the history of daylight savings time in the U.S. And third, we briefly discussed what would happen if we got rid of daylight savings time. So I want to leave you with a funny little quote that I found. Daylight savings time occurs because Chuck Norris hits the snooze button on his alarm clock. That made me laugh. It was an anonymous quote as well. So what do you guys think? Do you think we should continue to use daylight savings time? Do you think we should abolish it altogether? Do you think we should institute a year-round daylight savings time and just stop changing it every, 7 months? Thank you guys. I want to say thank you multiple times for supporting me and giving me your input on these speeches. And this is the last one. So thanks, y'all.